Hi and a good day. This is Lecture 4, Adaptations of Invasive Animal Species. Generally speaking, the founder populations of introduced animal species, when compared with the native species, are presumably low and have low genetic diversity. Once established, populations that become invasive develop the ability to sustain their populations, meaning they are able to maintain their populations through reproduction without the need for additional introductions. It must be noted, however, as mentioned in the paper of Stapley et al. 2015, there are introduced populations with higher genetic variation than the native counterparts as a result of admixture from several populations. There are various environmental pressures on invaders which they should overcome. To find a niche, they should find tolerable environmental conditions, which may include temperature, moisture, salinity, etc., availability of resources, and low predator or parasite pressure. Once the invader is able to survive the new environment, it must then be able to reproduce, and the population growth rate should be fast enough to reduce vulnerability to stochastic events. In both pathways shown here, a critical stage of the invasion success is how fast an introduced species is able to adapt to its new environment. This will determine whether it will succeed or fail to establish. In Koller and Lodge 2001, characteristics of the established introduced species and interactions with species within the invaded community determine how widespread it will become. Some remain relatively localized around the point of introduction and therefore are considered as non-invasive species, whereas others spread widely and become invasive. In Lockwood et al. 2005, they attribute propagule pressure or introduction effort to establishment success. As the number of releases and/or the number of individuals released increases, propagule pressure also increases. Why alien species, whose initial populations are generally small and genetically depleted, can succeed to establish themselves in environments to which they have had no opportunity to adopt, or the genetic paradox of invasive alien species, may be explained by their pre-adaptations. The idea is that some species are successful invaders because they have attributes that pre-adopt them to survive and reproduce in novel environments. Adaptations are characters or traits that cause niche diversification that has evolved through natural selection with a positive effect in terms of survival. Phenotypic plasticity refers to some of the changes in an organism's behavior, morphology, and physiology in response to a unique environment. From the paper of Galambor et al. 2007, the role of plasticity in allowing colonization and subsequent adaptation to new habitats can be illustrated using Fisher's geometric model of adaptation. In this figure, the thick outer circle represents the n-dimensional phenotype of the ancestral population, X, and the optimal phenotype for the new environment is at the center of the circle. So shown here are three types of phenotypic plasticity. A represents a genotype with perfect adaptive plasticity. The new environment causes individual phenotypes to change in exactly the correct vector in n-dimensional phenotypic space. B represents a genotype in which the plasticity is also adaptive but incomplete, placing individuals outside the optimum. In genotype C, the plasticity is non-adaptive and moves individuals further away from the optimal phenotype. In the same paper is an illustration that depicts three genotypes that have the same reaction norms within the range of environments they experience. All three genotypes coexist in the same population and experience the same variable environment, for example, temperature. Selection maintains the ability of these three genotypes to respond appropriately, or this is adaptive plasticity, to the range of environments that they experience. However, since these genotypes have never been exposed to the novel environments on the high and low end, this part of the reaction norm evolves neutrally and accumulates cryptic genetic variation. This part of the reaction norm is not adaptive or even relevant for the current environment. But since the genotypes differ in this part of the reaction norm, by chance one of them could be pre-adopted for a novel environment. A number of traits or pre-adaptations that have been hypothesized to affect the invasion potential of terrestrial vertebrates are: 1. Niche breadth. Generalist species should be better invaders than are specialists, because the former are more likely to find appropriate resources in new environments. Another is behavioral flexibility. Species with larger brains and higher behavioral flexibility should be better invaders than less flexible ones, because they may behaviorally adopt the new environment. Another one is social behavior. Social species should be better invaders than solitary ones. Social foraging may be advantageous for invaders because it can increase the probability of detecting a predator, locating food, and learning about new food sources. However, social species may also have difficulties to survive and/or reproduce when they are in low numbers due to the alley effect, which may counterbalance the benefits. Another pre-adaptation to specific environments is human commensalism. Human commensalists should be better invaders than non-commensalists because introductions are generally carried out in human modified habitats. Now, traits that help avoid stochastic extinction are life histories and population growth and lifespan. Species with life histories that increase intrinsic population growth rates are expected to have a better chance of surviving because this species may attain large population size faster. For lifespan, long-lived species should show a higher probability of establishing themselves in a new habitat as they are less exposed to stochastic extinctions. This figure from Stapley et al. 2015, which I had asked you to read last week, shows how transposable elements or TEs could facilitate rapid adaptation in invasive species. TEs are genetic elements that can replicate and/or move to new positions in the genome. TEs constitute a large fraction of the total genomic DNA and regulate gene expression in many organisms. With respect to invasive species, TEs may play an important role in maintaining genetic variation or contribute to phenotypic plasticity within source populations that could underlie invasive species success. Alternatively, stress experienced by invasive species during introduction could alter TE regulation of genes, increase TE copy number variation, and generate small and large-scale genetic variation. There have been numerous studies on Rhinella marina, especially in Australia. In a study of Jessup et al. 2013 of the invasion front of cane toads in Australia, they investigated how hormones influence organismal performance, survival, and ultimately local adaptation. Their study suggests the adrenocortical stress response is essential in setting fitness trajectories of invasive species during range expansion. In the Philippines, Rhinella marina is found throughout the Philippines except for Palawan. Remember, we have our endemic toad Ingerophrynus philippinicus, or the Philippine toad, there. Unfortunately, the invasive marine toad is now present in Palawan as reported by C. and Heredero in 2019, thanks to its introduction to the island. Imagine that. Anyway, for your learning activity, predict scenarios as to how this marine toad will adopt and become established or not in Palawan Island. Use best available information to create various scenarios. So you may now proceed with your learning activity. Have a good day and remember to stay safe.